Cool, cool.
Everybody. My name is Lisarox, and I'm here with Big Fong Balls, and I'm going to play for you Phantasy Star 2 Any Percent on the Sega Genesis Steam version, and this game came out in 1989, so very retro. Um, this is the Any Percent category, so it uses glitches to beat the game as fast as possible. And start the countdown, and then hand it over to Vic. So
Yeah, I guess I'm the resident expert right now.
okay, new game. 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, cool. So we got Fantasy Star 2. It's one of the main ones in the mainline series. 3 is kind of its weird side-ish game, but 1, 2, and 4 kind of have direct connections to each other. So there's kind of references to the first one, and then we get started with our boy ABWX. And he's going to get his job from the governor and hit up his kind of cat lady waifu roommate friend. And immediately this game comes directly into glitching. So this is any percent. There is a glitchless category that's around 5 hours, but this is going to be done in less than 1. And so the first thing Lisa's going to do is empty Rolf's inventory and then hop into the bank, where she's going to trick the game into letting her open up Rolf's empty inventory. And that's going to open up kind of a phantom inventory, as you might be seeing soon or now, where she's actually highlighting items that are completely off screen. So the big thing that's happening here is, once you kind of trick the game into thinking there's an inventory, but there really isn't, it actually ends up opening an inventory that's linked to all kinds of game features. And so what she's able to do is scroll off screen. The last item you see on the second window here, or somewhere around, because I think there's a slight delay, is item slot 16. And she's actually going to be going into item slots 46, 56, 54, 42, and other things. And so what's really happening here is twofold. Item slots 46 and 56 are the ones that are used very, very often, especially 56. And Rolf's item slot 56 is directly linked to Nay's defense stat. And so what we can do with careful routing is that you can kind of switch around Nay's armors. Sometimes you can unequip something, sometimes you can throw something away, which actually changes the value differently. To manipulate her defense value, and every single defense value is then linked to something else. So if she has a defense, I'm just going to make up some numbers of like 50, and then you pull from slot 56, which is linked to that value that happens to be 50 right now. Item or value number 50 might then be linked to, Nay shot or something like that, and then she can actually pull that and put it in her inventory. And so what probably feels like a really kind of slow and boring part of the run, where she's just sitting in the menu over and over and over and over again, what she's actually doing is altering values for Nay's character, and then hopping into Rolf's phantom inventory and pulling from Nay's stats to get items out of the ether, if you will, and then put it in her inventory. So a lot of what's happening right now is her pulling either very useful items like a Moondew out, or a Visiphone, or she's pulling out key items like blue card, yellow card, Nay shot, things like that. She's going to be in the item shop, and then she's also going to sell a phantom item. It's a Laconia helmet, to get some money, and then this money is also going to last her the entire rest of the run. From there, she's going to buy a few basic items, 2 telepipes and 4 escapipes, just to be able to warp around, because there's not going to be a lot of leveling up. Rolf eventually gets abilities to warp around, but that's not really going to be happening. So, and now she's just going to leave. So ultimately what happened there was 1 of 2 rounds of glitching stats. A little bit, not a lot. That'll happen later. But what she did was she pulled out a lot of key items. And so I'll be kind of dropping those as they happen, when they happen. In the meantime, there's certain triggers that need to happen, as well as she needs to fill out her party. And so this is something you would do casually too. As soon as you started moving along, you would absolutely go to the first town, Arima, so that you can pick up Rudo. So the way this game works is every new town you visit, you can then go back to your own home and you'll have a new party member. So by just quickly entering this town, you can set up that trigger to get the next party member. Here, it's just a nice little trick. I didn't know till speedrunning that you can actually enter the tube from the side, so that actually saves a lot of steps. And then she's going to move on. One of the key items she glitched is a person. So normally, casually, you have to rescue Tame or Time or whatever her name is as part of story triggers so that you can make it through this tube on the left that she's near. Instead of doing that, like I said, we could actually just pull that item from nowhere and put it in the inventory. And so instead of having to do the dungeons, you can actually skip the dungeons, because the only thing you care about is having that item, even though it's a person, in the inventory. So that's what's happening there. We're running from battles, because running should always be faster, but also we don't have any items. So kind of unfortunate she had like a 3rd or 4th try run, even though there's a 70% chance of success to run from that battle. So now that the Time item, even though again she's a person, is in her inventory, the game knows to play this cutscene. One of the other things she did is she actually duplicated the item. So now she's going to walk back in, and it's actually going to try to play the cutscene again, but it can't. So it actually kind of puts her in this weird phantom zone. That's why you could kind of see her walk across, even though there was nothing there. And it doesn't like particularly save time on its own, but it makes it so that she doesn't get any encounters. This is actually a dangerous area of the game to have 0 items and low levels and only 2 party members. So it actually made this game very, very safe. So now she's going to fill out the rest of her party member. She's going to get Rudo and Amy. And it's not so much that like you have to have party members to progress in this game, but you do. It is just plainly faster to fill out your entire party, as well as the fact that you really need another person to pick up the rest of the items. So she's going to do the exact same thing. If you happen to miss what happened before, or maybe explanations were a little too fast or not good, she's going to be doing the same thing, emptying Rudo's inventory, going to the bank, opening Nay's inventory, and then once you do that, the game allows you to open someone else's inventory who doesn't have any items. And once you do that, the game has no choice but to give you access to a bunch of other stuff. And so, again, all of those phantom item slots are always linked to something. And the slot that's going to be used most often is item slot 56, which is linked to the person behind them's defense. So Rolf's 56 is Nay's defense, and Rudo's 56 is Amy's defense. And you can alter those values, and when you alter those values and try to pull from that same value, you will pull different items from the same area. And so we're about to hit the second round of glitching. The next thing that's going to happen is Lisa's going to fill out her inventory. There's just a few other items she needs. There's a couple, or actually I guess one piece of armor she has to buy, and then she has to buy weapons for her ladies. So now that Rolf's and Rudo's inventories are glitched, they're actually, you don't have access to them. They can't, let's say, normally equip items. There's workarounds and things like that. But so it's really just the ladies that you're worried about. So she's going to equip the bars on Ney. It's the only thing Ney will need. You might be able to see their defense values are kind of effed up. And that's kind of on purpose. And yeah, so the next thing that's going to happen is you may wonder why Rolf's name is ABWX. That's not like some weird meme or anything that Lisa's trying to do. It's actually part of the glitching. Item slots let me think here, 21 through 24 are actually item slots that are linked to Rolf's name. And again, remember the item slots are also connected to a specific value. So what she's doing is actually pulling items from Rolf's name. That's why you see that his name changed from ABWX to like a weird Tetris block. Because you're actually pulling values from her name and pulling items from, his name. And so ABWX has to happen. I believe there's one other combination that works, but it's specifically that. So that way in slot 21, which is linked to the first letter of his name, A has the value that matches with like Ney helmet or some crap. I don't remember. And so she's going to pull those items from his name. From there, she's going to do more of the same stuff as was happening with Rolf. She's going to alter Amy's defense values and eventually agility value as well, and then pull from those values in Rudo's inventory so that she can pull out more and more key items. So the big thing about this game is it's almost all equipment based and not story trigger based. There's a few story triggers she's going to have to do, and there's a few she's also skipping. But the big thing is like the way the game knows you're making progress is by checking your inventory for the specific items. And so again, because we have this glitched inventory and we understand the game's values that, you know, value 127 equals Ney armor or something like that, you can do what you need to do to change values and pull the items you need. So the big part of the beginning of the game right now is pulling important, useful items and or key items to tell the game, actually, you know, to trick the game, like, hey, I clearly did all this content because look at me, I have all these items, and thus this game is going to be finished a hell of a lot faster than you would do casually, because instead of actually doing anything, you just pull the key items into your inventory and then you don't have to do any of it. So the last bit of menuing and glitching that's going to happen here is this buying. And so remember that you don't really have access to Rolf and Rudo's inventories because they're glitched, but their inventories technically do exist. And so what she's doing is she's filling up their garbage inventories with antidotes. It'll be purely antidotes for Rudo and a combination of antidotes, dimates, and escapipes for Rolf. Because these items have values too. So a lot of it's in its own way kind of garbage, but like ultimately what she's doing is she's setting specific values to stats. Remember that Rolf's and Rudo's inventories are linked to Ney's and Amy's stats respectively. So just for example, as she unloads antidotes onto Rudo's inventory, she's actually setting a value for every item slot, and those item slots affect Amy's stats. So what she's doing right now with antidotes specifically is setting a value of 5,140 to every single slot that she puts an antidote in. So eventually this is going to give Amy 5,000 experience. It's going to give Amy 5,000 HP. It's going to give Amy 5,000 strength, 5,000 defense, 5,000 agility, all that. Rolf's is a little bit different because there's a combination of things and not just straight antidotes. But the point is that now their stats are all messed up, and this is how she's going to be able to complete the game having not done anything. And then she gets a super early battle. So there's really two components to the speedrun. Really, really, really good menuing. Getting through all that glitching really, really fast. And then from there, it's really just battle RNG. So she does still have to do certain things. And so there's still a couple of parts of the game she's going to have to do. And right now, the first thing she's going to have to do is get the jet scooter. It's not because the jet scooter itself is super necessary, but the dams are, and you need the scooters for that. So the big thing, as mentioned in chat, is no, there is no way to warp straight to the end of the game because you're still working within the confines of the game here. So the problem here is the only way you could warp to the game is by having a very specific item, which is the Nay Sword. And unfortunately, on the American version, there is no way to pull that item, and you have to get it the old-fashioned way. On the Japanese version, it's actually much shorter. There's also a credit warp, so an even shorter version. But even on the Japanese equivalent to this, you can actually pull the Nay Sword and then warp directly to Lutz or Noah, and then directly to the end of the game. But unfortunately, on the American version, you have no choice but to get there. Not really in the old-fashioned way, but you do have to go through some parts of the game. Okay, so on the previous battle, you kind of saw the end result of having 5,000 everything. So the reason why Amy gained 1 billion levels, because one of those antidotes set a slot for 5,000 experience. So that's a lot of experience in this game. Yeah, so if you open the menu correctly as you take a step, it will not, as long as you do it correctly, it will not increment the step counter. And so you can, there's definitely a lot of tech, well, maybe not a lot, there's some tech to it that Lisa's not really doing, but the idea is that when you open the menu, it essentially doesn't count as a step towards an encounter. And so there are situations where it's useful to pop into the menu a bunch of times to try to push off an encounter until later, or even maybe skip one through the next transition. Typically, you only want to do it as long as the camera isn't panning, because if the camera's panning, it actually slows you down. It it forces you to pause until it pans, and then it'll let you keep going. Which is slower than getting encounters in many occasions. So you really want to do it only when the camera is not going to pan. But in plenty of situations, you can string 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 what we call menu steps in a row, in order to kind of help stave an encounter off. Lisa really only does it every now and then. So, it's hard to say how much it's going to help her, but, you never know.
Not everyone can be a world record holder. There's always learning involved in the speedrun.
Yeah.
Something new every time.
For sure. So, but yeah, it's obviously a decision she's gonna make. So getting kind of back to what I was saying, at this point in time in the game, it's really twofold as to what makes this run quote unquote fast. Is knowledge of encounters and just general encounter luck. Because even though she's really, really, really strong, it's still if she were really, really lucky and got 0 encounters every screen, obviously that's going to be really fast, whereas every encounter is going to slow her down. And so first and foremost, you're really hoping that you don't get into a lot of encounters, because no matter what the encounter is, obviously it's just going to slow you down. From there, there's some general knowledge needed for which encounters are runnable and which ones are not. And so as she's in an encounter with Fire Eyes and a Fang, she may decide that perhaps the Fire Eye run rate is not super great and may want to fight it, or she may try to risk it. It really just depends. So there's a number of encounters where you have a 60 or 70% chance, depending on which enemies are there, to run away, and typically that's what you're going to do, is you are going to attempt to just run away from those, and you can lose those rolls, as many times as the game wants you to, but obviously you're trying to play to the odds. And then there's plenty of ones like the frogs, which give you about, I think, a 30 or 40% chance of running, at which point in time it's really not worth your time to try to see if you're going to get lucky. You're better off really just killing them off. And even though it takes a little bit of extra time, you're probably not going to get away, and that's what you're going to have to do. So we're in Rorin right now. It's the junkyard. There's been like 4 dungeons that Lisa has skipped so far just because she hasn't needed to. She's pulled the inventory item she needed already, so she can skip all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. And so the key here is she's getting the jets. So one of the very few legitimate game story triggers that has to happen, because we can't warp straight to the end of the game, are the closing of the dams. This happens, well into the game after you've handled the monster problem in this game that we completely skipped. And there's one big trigger we've skipped too that I'll hold off on because it's got a pretty big effect on what the speedrun looks like. But in the meantime, because the dams are only accessible via the jet scooter, that means this content has to be done. And unfortunately, the jet scooter is not an inventory item like vehicles typically were in 1 and 4. It is something that she has to have access to on the world map. So the only thing you have to do is talk to this dude at the end of the dungeon and then leave. He's like, hey, I'm going to show off my jet scooter. Do you want to see? And you're like, yeah, cool. And then you go to the jet scooter and they're like, actually, we don't want a jet scooter anymore. Have it. Okay. And now we're going to do the dams. So normally by now you've had to go get dynamite from the first dungeon. You got to get Time or whatever her name is from the second dungeon. You have to get the recorder from the biolab. We haven't done any of that. We did do this dungeon. There's no point stopping off at Zima for Anna or any other party member because we're all set here. That would just be for fun at this point in time. And now we're going to close the dam. So what was supposed to have happened is after doing some things, the kind of weather system gets out of whack and you have to open the dams to make everything okay again. And unfortunately for the speedrun, these 4 dams are 4 triggers you have to do. And so here she is. She's going to be walking through the red dam first, and then, let me think here, then green, then yellow, then blue. And you're probably noticing a extreme lack of encounters right now, and it's not because she's just getting the god luck. I would actually dare say her encounter luck this run has been pretty bad. But that tends to happen in this game. It just kind of is what it is. Anyone who's grinded this game, it's just kind of like you bang your head against the wall till you get the one lucky run. Otherwise, most of the time you just get owned. But anyway, getting back to it, because there was certain content we just never had to do because we could just pull the items out and move forward. One of the things that doesn't have to happen is Lisa does not have to kill the first of 3 bosses in this game called Nay First. And so this game is kind of interesting in that there's actually just one trigger that sets off a whole wave of changes. And so normally, if you're familiar with this game, is you deal with the monster problem, and then you go try to fix the weather, and then you come up against Nay first, and she kills Nay, and then you kill her. And then you get branded as fugitives, at which point in time, once you're branded as fugitives, all of the encounters on the planet Lisa's on change. And that's a trigger, right? The trigger is you kill Nay first, and then all the encounters change, including the population of all future dungeons from that point. So by skipping Nay first, the game never makes that change. And so what'll happen is anywhere that wasn't already populated with encounters actually still never gets populated with encounters. And so not only then now is Nay alive and is going to be alive through the entirety of the run, but for any dungeon past climate control, there will be 0 encounters because the game did not know, was not told to populate them with encounters because Nay First was never killed in the first place. And so what you'll see is that the overworlds are really the only place Lisa's going to see encounters anymore. And any dungeon she goes to is going to have 0 encounters. So there'll still be encounters here. They'll be the old ones because these overworld encounters were already there from the start of the game. As you can see, they didn't switch over to robots, which it normally would have. And so she can still get slowed down by these normal encounters, but she will not be seeing any encounters in any future dungeon. So she has 3 remaining dams. There will be 0 encounters there. When she gets to the crevice or the last dungeon, there will be no encounters there either. But there will be overworld encounters because those are there from the get-go. And so you'll start to see why this game, at least within the community, has been nicknamed Walking Simulator, because of 0 encounters and really not a whole lot of menuing, because really all the menuing happened in the very beginning. Really, all you really end up doing in the speedrun for a while is just walking to the next place and then walking to the next place and then walking to the next place, which is kind of funny. And, I mean, people will have their different tastes. So some may consider it boring, which I can't really argue with. But, in theory, it's got some fun. I think the big thing that helps a game like this, where you're not really up to anything for a little while, is the fact that the game's soundtrack is just really, really good. It's definitely got that old school build where there's really only so many tracks, 7 dungeons will have the same song, 4 dungeons will have the same song. But at least on my end, and for some of the people who have run this game, it's just chill. It's nice. You get to relax a little and just rock out to the soundtrack, and it's kind of nice. But yeah, I really can't deny that, of course, there's just a lot of walking. It just kind of is what it is. So maybe just to recap, what we've done is glitch out Rolf, who's dead right now, and Rudo's inventory. And in the process of glitching out their inventory, you can pull key items into the ladies' inventory, so you can skip a bunch of content. And in the process of doing that, as well as doing some weird shopping, you can glitch out Nay's and Amy's stats as well, and to make them super buff. So they have extremely high defense, agility, HP, and damage. So ultimately, at this point, all of the prep work happens in the beginning. They do all the stat glitching and the item pulling in the beginning, and then there's just certain content you have no choice but to do, such as right now. And so that's what she's going to be doing. But in the overworlds are the only place she's going to be getting encounters, and she's well overpowered for them, but it's still faster to try to run and try to be lucky. So even though she would have one-shot both of those enemies, it's still faster to just try to run. There's certain ones with low enough percentage chances to run, you may as well fight. But like these bees, for example, you run from those. And yeah, so we're well equipped to finish the game. We just have to actually be able to get to the end to do it. So for reference, the current fastest known time for any percent is 35 minutes, 28 seconds with turbo, and 36-minute flat without turbo. And then there is a glitchless category of this game, which has not been super optimized, but just to give you an idea of the things you can get away with, is currently the fastest time for glitchless in English is 5 hours and 14 minutes, which I'm about 1,000% sure can dip under 4 hours. But obviously that would be a bit of a grind. So with enough extensive game knowledge, you can definitely get away with beating this game much faster than any of us would have casually. But obviously, when it comes to glitching out the game, it's going to go way the hell fast.
To call this game a good beginner speed. You speedrun anything before because you don't have many encounters. Doing it first in the beginning. Definitely recommend this game for people that are interested in trying out a speedrun. Our community is very small, but there are people around willing to help.
Yeah, so for its potential problems, depending on what viewer taste might be, it's definitely a solid speedrun in a lot of ways. There are notes for the game that that I compiled based off other people's work. Telling you what menu things to do. It's got maps of every dungeon and blah blah blah. So all you would really have to do is follow instructions, and you could do the speed run too. It's short, right? So even when you're like really starting off and going really, really, really slow, it's still something you're going to be able to accomplish, an hour and a half, maybe maximum, to on your first couple of times. And it's like, okay, whatever. That's really not that much time. And yeah, you can jam out to the soundtrack. It's just a really simplistic run. Sometimes simple is maybe looked down upon, but other times simple is nice to do. Yeah, you're gonna want to go left and then up. But yeah, it's just a nice solid run. Really, all you have to learn outside of all the menuing. So the menuing is probably the hardest part to get used to. But from there, it really just becomes like learning dungeon layout, and you can do that slowly because I have all the maps prepared for you. And just kind of learning which battles you should run from and which ones you shouldn't. But even if you don't want to think about that, you can just kill every single battle. It's slower to do that, obviously, but that's how I started off. I just killed everything because I had no idea. So whatever, it's kind of open in terms of what you want to take on. Really, the only strict part is the menuing has to be done a certain way in the very beginning, or else things don't work. But other than that, pretty simple. So we're on the third of the 4 dams. The dams are in a way meant to be in a certain order, just because the encounters get harder as you do the certain sets of dams. Like, for example, the green dam, which Lisa did second, has the toughest encounters. So on, and the red dam, I believe, has the weakest ones. Although this game is pretty well known for kicking your butt. But when you have no encounters to worry about, then you may as well just do them in whatever is convenient geographically. There we go. To do. So it's the same thing. You have to use the cards. So it's yellow, blue, red, and green cards were one of them, or some of the many items we pulled into the inventory, or that she pulled in the inventory. And you have to use the card to get into the dam, and you have to use the card to open up the dam. You can hear the sound of the water opening, I guess is what that is, and then move on. So there's one more dam, and then we'll be able to progress the story. So you can imagine what kind of routing has to go in just to figure out what value connects to what item, what combination of items you should have to try to get those key items, what kinds of things should happen in what order, because every action you make may have a lasting effect on their defense or something like that. And so I don't necessarily know who might have been the super godfather of all this, but I do know 2 people who put in a crap ton of work in making this possible, which is Jacid and Starboard 5. These 2 people, I'm sure other people have put in work. There's the disassemblies that have been done that have helped a lot too, probably by Lori, but I'm sure there's a couple of people from way back in the day that I'm totally ignoring. But as far as a lot of what you're seeing right now today comes from the work of Starboard and Jacid. They put in a lot of time to make this route possible. Jacid himself has updated the route a couple of times just within the last couple of years. And I might have made the notes that make the speedrun accessible, but I wouldn't have been able to do any of that without the work they've done. So shout outs to them. They did a lot of work on this. They've done a lot of work in general on the Phantasy Star series. I think Starboard started a lot of kind of collection of data and ideas and things like that. And Jacid often is the one who puts the routes together into something that's more and more and more optimized. And yeah, I think that's the case for, I think, all 4 Phantasy Stars. Like, he started up the one run on Sega Master System that VO and perhaps some others kind of progressed from there. Any of the recent optimizations for this run has been done by Jacid. Same with 3. 4 is probably the only one that's been blown open by other people. It's got the biggest community for sure as well, which is always going to be a part of that. The more people, the more ideas. And Jacid was the one to get this game not necessarily started, but like kind of was the first one to actually put a full route together. And then other people kind of worked from there. But again, still based off of his work. So those are some people who don't stream very often anymore, but definitely put a lot of work not only into the game you're watching now, but in the entire mainline series. I don't think they've messed with like online or anything, but no. There's other content Lisa could do if she wanted, but there's literally no point. It would just slow your speed run down. There's a couple more dungeons we didn't do because you don't have to. There's like 5 other towns or something like that. She could visit and then get 5 new party members, but why? There's just really no point. The party of 4 is all you need. I think Starbird runs something like he calls 100%, which is still glitched. So it's really just an extended category of this game, where you're going to pick up every party member and get every item the old-fashioned way, but there's still half the dungeons won't have encounters, and 2 of his 4 party members will be all buff and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like, whatever you're into, but it doesn't like necessarily add anything to what Lisa's already done. You're kind of just doing the rest of the game, if you will. And then, of course, as mentioned before, glitchless does exist. For people who may be familiar with this game, there's a lot less grinding that has to happen. Outside of a handful of pieces of equipment, most pieces of equipment aren't super helpful. It's really more about levels. And so there is a lot of, there's a fair chunk of grinding in the first like 2.5 hours of the run. Basically through Biolab, there is a lot of grinding to be done. To get some of your base items and to get HP levels that are meaningful. I'll get back to that in a sec. So no matter what the 4th dam is, it doesn't have to be blue, you will be ambushed by the army eyes. They finally catch up to you because technically you're being hunted right now. It's an unwinnable battle unless you quite literally cheat. And you soft lock the game anyway. And so the key is that on their last action of the 3rd turn, they will capture you. And so you just have to get there. The fastest way to do that is to try to run away every time. There is actually a 1 in 256 chance that you succeed in running away, even though you're not supposed to be able to, and then you'll also soft lock the game. But anyway, you could choose to fight him if you wanted. It's just slower. This dungeon has no encounters for the same reasons as discussed. It does have these little damage tiles. Otherwise, there's no danger. Here's my favorite sound in the game, coming or already coming or whatever. It's really, really, really obnoxious. Well, they capture you and they put you in jail. That's where you are in, basically. And then you escape the jail. And as you escape the jail, you notice someone has set a course of the jail you're in. It's a satellite into a planet, which destroys the entire planet somehow. And then you get rescued by a space pirate named Tyler. And in the English version, they don't really allude to it, but in Japanese, the language suggests that you absolutely die. And he basically finds your cells and clones you, which is also how reviving in this game works. They clone you. So it's suggested in Japanese, if I recall correctly, that you hella blow up. And then they scrape your cells off the debris and revive you. But in English, it's like, oh, we saved you. Oh, okay, cool. Thanks,
Too
man.
violent for, late 80s.
And so one of the funny things that happens, normally after you come back from Gyra, you play the next segment of the story. But because of not killing Nay first and not setting the next triggers, the game actually has no idea what cutscene to play. So it actually plays the beginning game cutscenes again. And because it plays the beginning cutscene again, you have to go back to your house and pick up your party members again. But yet the game is still progressible because of the triggers we set from the dam. It's really weird. And so we're still able to go to... So here we are in Skier. Skier would actually have encounters, because if you didn't know, Skier and the Dizo overworld are actually in the same map. So Skier actually counts as the overworld. And we used to have to do this part of the game as part of the run, until it was finally thought of that you could actually, if you take the time to pull the Visiphone and then use the Visiphone, which is an item that lets you save anywhere, it'll actually set your teleport point to Dizo Town. I forget which one it is. And then you get to skip all of Skier on it already, and that makes the run about a minute and a half faster. And so that's exactly what happened. You got to Skier, you saved, you telepiped with your last one, and now you're here. And then it's just a much faster way to get to the crevice. Lisa's probably going to get 1 or 2 or 3 encounters in the overworld, and then be able to move on. And so normally when you're in Dizo, you have to go to Esper Mansion through the crevice to be set on a quest. And then you have to leave, and then you have to go to 4 dungeons, at least 2 of which are god-awful. And then you'd have to come back. But remember, all the way in the beginning, we pulled every key item we could have access to in our inventories already. So now, as we approach Esper Mansion after we beat this dungeon, the Lutz will just be like, oh, cool, you have everything. Move on. And so, yeah. So at this point, this is the only dungeon we get to hear the song in the speedrun. This is one of my personal favorites. So enjoy. If you have any other questions in chat, feel free to let me know. I feel like I had to talk about a lot of stuff and I might have gone like way too fast, so just let me know. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy the rest of the run, which will probably be done in, I don't know, like 5 minutes or a little more maybe. How strong is Cat Girl waifu? She's very strong. It's easy to miss 90% of this because it's such a short run, but thank God for bots. Great question. All right, so here's Esper Mansion. If you were particularly ballsy. You could skip pulling the Moon Dew from the inventory as the first thing, but that's quite ridiculous to do in a lot of circumstances because Rolf is so weak that he'll die to one hit to any Dizo encounter, and they actually won't let you in here if Rolf's not alive. So you have to, I mean, you don't have to, but you should pull the Moon Dew just in case he dies. In the meantime, this is where Lutz would set you on a quest. But we already did everything, quote unquote, did everything, so whatever. And we can just keep going. You could probably also by now hear that the sound is glitched. That's quote unquote normal. You need to only pause the game a couple times or a lot of times. And then the sound will reset itself once the conversation is over. So then you just talk to Lutz again, and he is like, "Are you ready to go?" And of course you say yes, and he warps you to the spaceship Noah, where you will face off with the last bosses. What was I going to say? There will be no encounters here either. This is the only dungeon you hear this particular song. And yeah, it's kind of a long dungeon that you would be marred with encounters with. But because we don't have any, once again, you get to just chill and walk your butts all the way to the last two bosses. There are, I guess, technically 4 bosses in this game. Nay First is skipped. Army Eye is unwinnable, but technically is a boss and has the boss thing. And then the last 2 remaining are Dark Force and Mother Brain. And so the big thing here is, like, first there's a monster problem, then there's a weather problem, then there's a, like, who's doing all this problem. And so finally we're getting to the end where you're trying to figure out the masterminds of like why everything is starting to go wrong. So when there's the monster problem, you find Nay first, and she's basically her and Nay are essentially quote unquote monsters. They were both created in a lab, and Nay first is kind of like rejected by humanity and lashes out. And once you kill her, you solve the monster problem. But then the weather problem comes up, and you set out to fix that. But you are branded as fugitives for some reason, and so you're fighting robots while you're trying to fix the weather. Then after you kind of say you don't really quite fix it, but you set the dams in place, then you finally get an inkling of like, well, someone's doing something. This is really bizarre. This is not right. So then you get shipped off to Dizo, where you meet Lutz, and he'd be like, yeah, cool. So like, there's some dark entities at play, and you need to go figure it out. But first you have to find all these like mystical items, which are the Nay items, before you're ready. We didn't do any of that because we just cheated. And then once you have all those items, you're sent here where you figure out what's going on. So the first thing you find is Dark Force. He's in a chest, kind of like a Pandora's box type thing. So here's your boss theme. It's mostly chill. The bosses, the last 2 bosses actually cover the entire top part of the screen, so you actually have no idea how much damage you're doing, but rest assured, Lisa's ladies are doing over 200 damage per hit. Dark Force is easily the trolliest boss in the game, although he's being very, very polite right now. He can do AoEs, which he's done twice, which is awesome. Or he can curse party members, like he's doing to Nay right here. You won't know until the next turn what the curse is. There's minor curses, which basically kind of alter your combat abilities, or there's major curses that keeps them from acting at all. So basically what Lisa got here is the most godlike Dark Force fight I've ever seen in my life. And so the boss died before I could even finish talking about it. But yeah, like it went as well as it could. There were no curses, there were no extra text, there was no possibility of losing a character. She just got through it. So after that is Mother Brain. Mother Brain is supposed to control life on Latavia and make things nice and easy, but something went wrong down the line, so you're also gonna destroy her as well. And so same deal. You don't get to see how much damage you're doing, but you're doing a lot. Mother Brain does have a flat 25% chance to dodge your attack. So even with a billion agility, they can still miss, just like what happened recently. But you can see Nays and Amy's whacked out HP numbers because it can't actually display quadruple digit HP. But even though they're getting hit, there's a 0% chance that they can die. It cannot happen. They have way too much HP. And otherwise, you just watch a ladies destroy the boss just like that, and that's it. So time will be after Lisa confirms the last few text boxes, but that's the run. RNG does matter in those fights if you're gunning for a ridiculous time, but otherwise it's nice and chill. Here at the end, and that's time there. 4909, is that a PB? It might be. Anyway, so you figure out here in Noah there's a bunch of Earthmen. They basically destroyed their own world and then live on a spaceship and are basically effing up the characters' world so they can take over. And then you fight them and everybody gets their time to shine. I don't know who these people are, but I guess we're around. And the ending is left ambiguous as to whether they survive or not. But yeah. There you have it. It's Phantasy Star 2 any percent. Glitch the game, get a bunch of items and massive stats, and then walk your way through the rest of the game to the end in less than an hour. Nice job.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for commentary. Thank you, RGL, for having me on your marathon. And yeah, if you have any questions about Phantasy Star 2, reach out. We have a Discord. Everyone's really nice. But yeah.